Welcome. So, were you present in at the launch at the Vegas Chamber? No. Okay. I don't see George. Is George coming?
He should be.
Okay. All right. All right. So, and then how about from the manufacturing group? Who's here? I see SMI. Nick, you are with? Cubicle. Yeah, I remember you guys. Sunshine Minting is here. Who else?
John Kumara, Ocean Spray Cranberry.
Ocean Spray. All right. Welcome, guys. And then finally from the IT sector, who's here from the IT sector? And this Craig from Amazon, Leo from, remind me, it's no longer, you changed the name.
Healthy Technology Solutions.
Healthy Technology Solutions. Welcome, Leo. Also a member of the Workforce Connections Board. Okay, so the reason we're here is to expose you guys to some options for registered apprenticeship. We have 3 presenters. We're going to roll right into it, and then we'll have some questions later. Again, the objective here is, as you know, we have some funding from multiple places coming to support these industry sector partnerships. So we want to find solutions that work for you and fund those solutions. That's the bottom line. So with that, first presenter is from Equus Workforce Solutions. Her name is Michelle. She's going to be on a cruise ship tomorrow. So before she leaves, come on down, Michelle. You're going to have the mic first and tell us about registered apprenticeships and the experience that Equus has with them and how you could support registered apprenticeships here for the employers at the industry sector partnerships.
All right. Thank you, Jaime. All right. Let's see if I can figure this out first. Okay. So, as Jaime said, my name is Michelle, and I'm a National Director with Equus Workforce Solutions. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present a little bit of information about registered apprenticeship programs and why more and more employers are looking at it as an option to help with recruiting and retention for their organizations. So, as National Director, I've got about 25 years of experience in workforce, and as an organization, we are one of the leading workforce development providers. We operate and provide programs. We serve businesses and career seekers. That's kind of the common theme throughout the programs that we operate. We serve adults, young adults. We operate Job Corps centers, career center operations, and I say this not to talk about our organization as much to say that we've got in-depth knowledge about the workforce system, the partners within the system, and how that can align with the work that's being done in the apprenticeship world. If you've seen the word apprenticeship lately, you've also seen that there's millions upon millions of dollars that are being offered to employers who want to invest in an apprenticeship program in order to help recruit, retain, and upskill talent. And that's really why I'm here today. So what is a registered apprenticeship program? It's a structured program that helps businesses upskill employees. Okay, that's really the bottom line. So the way that I like to present it when I'm talking to employers is that essentially what a registered apprenticeship program does and what we can help you do for your organization is package the work that you're already doing. So whether that's you're already providing on-the-job training, you're already providing related instruction or requiring related instruction. So essentially what a registered apprenticeship program does is it formalizes that. That's not a scary word. We try to make it as simple as possible and through conversation gather information about what are your prerequisites for your key occupations? What are your pay scales for your occupations? What does a career pathway look like within your organization? And what opportunities do you have? We package that into what the Department of Labor calls a registered apprenticeship program standard. So we do that work with you and for you. It's also been proven, especially in skilled trades. There's many years of documentation in skilled trades of how the return on investment, especially as it relates to retention, can run anywhere from 91 to 94% for those operating a high quality registered apprenticeship program in the way that it was intended to operate. And I say that because I'm sure somebody in the room has an example of a registered apprenticeship program that has not worked. And fortunately or unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, what I've seen is that for employers who try to operate what I'm calling a one and done registered apprenticeship program, especially for an entry-level position. They're not seeing the return on investment that, you know, the U.S. Department of Labor, the state apprenticeship agencies publish on their websites. And that's because it really is a strategic approach to being part of how you hire, train, and upskill your employees. And as I mentioned earlier, millions upon millions of dollars are being invested right now to help employers through the crisis to recruit and retain employees. We, as one of the 16 national intermediaries, and there's many, many other local and regional intermediaries, but we can help you tap into some of those, provide information about tax credits, incentive funding, and things that are available to help you offset the cost of training or developing a program. So I mentioned this earlier, it's not, it's moved beyond the trades, partially because of the investment that the administration has made, or a lot because of the investment that the administration has made, but more and more employers through the pandemic have found themselves in crisis mode. Healthcare being one of the hardest hits, those essential employee occupations being very hard hit during the pandemic. So more and more employers are looking at this as an option or a solution to put in their toolbox as it relates to recruiting and retaining employment. So what are the program components? As I mentioned earlier, it's essentially packaging what you're already doing. The wording may be a little different, in some of these areas, but it essentially combines on-the-job training, which hopefully everyone's offering to their new hires or to their existing employees. Related instruction, whatever that related instruction is that's required for that occupation. A progressive pay schedule. And that always kind of catches people off guard and sounds a little scary, but remember, an apprenticeship program is a long-term strategic approach, so that progressive pay schedule will vary by occupation and is over at least a 1-year time frame. So typically that aligns, with what employers are already doing, which is offering a merit increase for those that are performing well. Mentoring, so it does have a component of mentoring that can be either the formal supervisor or can be the related instruction provider if they're providing that related instruction in-house, but a designated person to touch base with what's called an apprentice or your employee who's going through the apprenticeship program, to touch base with them and to offer them the opportunity to ask questions and to ask how they're doing, to monitor their progress in the program. Sounds harder than it is. A high quality program also includes diversity, equity, the safety protocols that are in place for your employees. Again, hopefully you already have those in place. I'm sure you do. And then it's an earn while you learn program. But going back to one comment, one thing to remember is this is an employer-driven, employer-designed program within the constructs of the Department of Labor requirements for an apprenticeship program. So the role of an intermediary, again, Equus is one of those intermediaries, is to have conversations. When we talk about assessing business needs, really it's a conversation. What are your pain points? What are your critical vacancies? What have you tried? Do you have an interest in learning more about how you can tap into apprenticeships or workforce system resources? Because as a comprehensive workforce development provider, we also have an in-depth knowledge about the resources that you can connect to. We serve as a personal guide, make it easy for you, take as much of the paperwork off your hands as possible. If I connect with you, I'm not going to send you forms with 20 questions, not going to send you paperwork to fill out. We do that through conversation and make it as simple as possible. So we try to take the pain and the guesswork out of the process. So what else do industry intermediaries provide? We provide technical assistance. Whether it's what is a registered apprenticeship program, if you want us to speak with your team or your staff or your supervisors, all the way to, okay, now I've got a program approved, I want to expand it to another occupation because we're seeing some success, some return on investment. How do we expand it? How do we launch it? What are those best practices? So we work through that, and then we provide that ongoing support, as little or as much as you're interested in. So I've said a lot of this already, but in addition to providing information and technical assistance, we also collaborate with all of the state agencies. And if you're talking about a licensed position, also like Department of Education or Board of Health, we collaborate with all the agencies that are required in order to make sure that the program that we're developing is in alignment with that particular local or state requirements. We are also, because we operate career centers and we had that knowledge, we're able to connect career seekers to your employment or your registered apprenticeship opportunities and vice versa. Just like Jaime and the team have done here, connecting businesses to the career centers to tap into that talent pipeline and to leverage those workforce system resources. So in addition to that, what we learned early on is that employers, as I mentioned earlier, they're in crisis mode. They don't have time to learn all the ins and outs of just basically tell me what paperwork you need from me, tell me what you need me to do. They don't have time to learn all of the behind the scenes regulations, requirements. So we decided to become a national program sponsor. And what that basically means is that as a program sponsor, we can take on a lot of that administrative paperwork, be that liaison between your organization and the Department of Labor, do that data entry, do that reporting, and again, take off the majority of the paperwork from your organization or your team. So when you launch a program, we can be that program sponsor, do that paperwork for you, do that data entry for you, do the Department of Labor reporting for you, until you get to a point where you're seeing that return on investment and you have an interest in expanding your program and becoming your own sponsor, sponsoring your own program. So that's just a service offering that we have available, again, at no cost. And some of the programs that we already have approved and that we're actively working with employers to operate these programs. These are our healthcare programs, and these are designed at the national level and can be customized for a specific employer's needs. And then these are the programs that are outside of healthcare. We've found and we've had a growing interest to get into the teaching, to provide registered apprenticeship programs for teachers. So we do have the K through 12 teacher program standard pending approval. We also have a middle school teacher program pending approval and a teacher's assistant program pending approval. So this just gives you an idea of the types of occupations we've developed. We've also helped employers develop a roofing apprenticeship program, a construction apprenticeship program, and others. So while our focus is on healthcare, information technology, and public service, we can assist other employers who don't have that support through an intermediary or through a state apprenticeship agency, or we can refer you to one of our partner intermediaries whose sole focus is on that specific occupation.
Any manufacturing?
We do not have any manufacturing approved under EQUIS sponsorship. However, we have helped in manufacturing for various positions to get their program approved either at the state level or at the national level. And we can. We're not like, again, even though those are our priority or our focus industries, we will help any employer who's not already connected to an intermediary for support. We've now had over 1,100 apprentices enroll in occupations, so pretty excited about that. And with 84% of them coming from underrepresented populations. So those are two pretty cool outcomes that I'm excited about. And that's what I've got.
Michelle, thank you for that. And to remind everybody, we are recording this for those employers who couldn't be here today. So as you can, we're going to make sure that when you ask questions, you do it in a mic so that they can hear the question. So anybody have any questions for Michelle so far? Again, we have two more presentations for you that will unfold, and she'll still be around. But for me, again, as I listen, Michelle, what would be some reasons why you mentioned that it can be complicated? That's what an employer doesn't have time. They have to run a business, make a profit. And so I'm hearing you say the intermediary organization, the program sponsor, steps in and does a lot of that work. So has that been, my question is, has that been key in getting employers who have not had experience in the past with apprenticeships start to do them?
It absolutely has, and that's why early on when we were awarded a contract with the U.S. Department of Labor, we were having a lot of phone calls with employers who didn't have time to get on a phone call and talk about acronyms that they hadn't heard of before, talk about programs that they saw an article, yeah, it might work, but they didn't have time to work out all of those details. So what we very quickly learned is that we needed to take on as much of that work for them and with them as possible through conversation. let's have a quick conversation, tell me about your pay scale, tell me about, and just answer the questions that I knew that we needed for the Department of Labor, and then package that for them, get their approval on it, and again, make it as simple as possible for them to be able to focus on what they need, which is recruiting talent, training upskilling and training their employees, and then, taking that next step. So then what we'll do through those conversations is, as the programs are launched, then we'll start to introduce something else. And hey, by the way, did you know that in the state of New York, they offer a, $5,000 tax incentive, or whatever that what if is, or did you know that you can connect to Workforce Connections, and for certain team members may be eligible to tap into X, Y, and Z resource. So we do it through conversation, because one of my newest team members reminded me I used 14 acronyms in one conversation.
Right.
And an employer doesn't, that's not what we're here for. We're here to provide a good customer experience for the employers that we connect and collaborate with.
All right, I have another question, but I'm gonna wait and see, make sure there's no employers that have questions. I'm looking around the room, I don't see any hands raised. So when you talk about, again, why should an employer do it? You've been very clear. We do the hard work for you. We come and take care of all the acronyms and the paperwork. We help you set up a registered apprenticeship in your company. And then I also heard you say some of the reasons to do it is because the apprenticeship structure brings leveraged resources that exist in this complex workforce development world. So it starts to unlock for an employer access to some of those resources. And then I also, of course, heard you say every employer wants a formalized mechanism by which to upskill their workforce. Some have it in their organization, some don't. But what did I miss? What other big plus is there to say this is why you want to do a registered apprenticeship? Tapping into the leveraged resources of the workforce system, formalizing a process in your organization that upskills your employees. Did I miss anything there?
Yeah, what I would say is, especially for when we stepped into this intermediary world, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and the essential workers and the entry-level positions, employers were in crisis mode. And so a lot of our occupations that you saw are those entry-level occupations in those industries, but that's where the crisis was, that's where the pain point was. And what I've watched happen is that for employers who do this well, who invest in their employees in the time and the training to do the on-the-job learning, to provide that related instruction, to encourage them and let them know what their next step is with the organization. I'll just give you a quote from one of our employers who is operating a pharmacy tech program. He let me know that he's been operating it now for about a year, and he said that when his apprentices or his employees who are coming in under the registered apprenticeship program, that his retention rate is 84%. He said his retention rate prior was 33%.
That's a good reason, yeah.
So we're seeing more and more organizations that when you package this, formalize it, and for lack of a better word, market it to your current workers or to your new hires, market the program, market the opportunities for growth. That's where we're seeing the highest return on investment.
Awesome, thank you, Michelle. So I said employers have questions, but let me rephrase that. Anybody who's here, if you have questions, this is your chance before I move on to the next presentation. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah, I got Craig right here. Let me turn this on, Craig. And let us know who you are, Craig.
I'm Craig von Kallenberg with AWS.
Who's that? Who's that?
Amazon Web Services, sorry. Just a quick question. For the existing occupations that you have, you say they're registered with the DOL. So if we were to come in and sign an employer acceptance agreement for that, would we bypass the need to register with the state?
That's a great question. And the technical answer is yes, you can bypass the state because we can operate a national program. However, as we work hard to collaborate with that state agency, make them aware that we're bringing this national standard in, that we're launching this program. And as the partnership progresses, then we simultaneously look at whether it's beneficial to go ahead and register locally as well after you go ahead and launch your national program. So one example of that is, and I'll be brief, one example is there's an organization in New York, 40,000 employees, they're upskilling 30 LPNs. Well, New York doesn't have LPN as a recognized apprenticeship standard yet. So rather than have them wait a year to launch their program, we're launching it under the national standard while simultaneously collaborating with the state apprenticeship agency in New York in hopes of taking a look at whether or not it makes sense for them to also register locally.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Anybody else? Okay, if not, we're gonna roll right into the next presenter. Michelle, you're gonna stick around for a little bit, right? Unless a question comes up. I know she's gonna leave before noon though to get on a plane again. She's going on a cruise. I'm jealous, Michelle. You're going on a cruise. But our next presenters are from the National Association of Workforce Boards. This is the organization that advocates on behalf of us, the 550 local boards across the country. Melanie and Janet are in the DC area right now. They were hoping to join us in person, but for multiple reasons they couldn't be here. But I'm going to welcome them. Can you hear me, Janet, Melanie?
We do, Jaime.
Awesome. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jaime. We are very disappointed that we were not able to join you all in person. We're working with his amazing team to try to get out to Las Vegas as soon as possible to continue some of these conversations. So just really quickly, a little bit about who we are. As Jaime said, we are the National Association for the 576 state and local workforce boards located around the country. We provide technical assistance to boards. We think about the policy impacts, what policy levers we can be pulling at the state and local levels so that workforce boards can better serve their communities. We also play a communications role. How do we look at some of these really important and critical workforce issues that are facing communities, and how do we elevate those issues and the different services that workforce boards could provide to employers in their communities? Thought I had control. Somebody might need to advance the slide for me if that's possible. Thank you. Workforce boards are very focused on this idea of work-based learning. And we often say that, apprenticeship is one of the toolbox or the tools in the toolbox of work-based learning. But really registered apprenticeships are the gold standard of workforce training. And Michelle talked about a lot of those reasons and why that is. And workforce boards have been very focused on the idea of registered apprenticeships in their community and what they could do to help employers engage with registered apprenticeships. And workforce boards are going to play many varying roles in the registered apprenticeship conversation in their communities. Some might work on promotion and enrollment of a program. Some might bring educators or other stakeholders to the table to bring some of these registered apprenticeship programs to a community. I wanted to share a couple of examples of what that partnership with the workforce board and what a workforce board can do for employers in their communities that are interested in registered apprenticeships. Seattle King County Workforce Board in Seattle, Washington, has really focused in on a few select industries: construction, automation, medical devices, to help employers with their programs, answer questions, but really think about recruiting and enrollment in those apprenticeship programs. Adams County in Colorado, again, took sort of an industry-wide approach to really focus in on youth and how you enroll youth in registered apprenticeship options. They also help think through the funding question that often comes with apprenticeship programs. And in Southeast Michigan, this is a really interesting sort of partnership where they've really served as that coordinating body with the State Department of Labor. As Michelle talked about, some of this can be very complicated and, lots of questions that employers might have. So the workforce board there has really acted as that information and a real coach to help employers in their community think about how to engage, how to start a registered apprenticeship program, and then also recruit and enroll participants. NAWB recently, as we're always looking to see how we can continue to help workforce boards and their communities with registered apprenticeships, we just started working on a project that we're really excited about in the supply chain automation industry with around some of those jobs. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jan to talk a little bit about this initiative and some of the resources that we are working with Workforce Connections to offer to employers to help grow registered apprenticeships in Las Vegas. Can you advance the slide?
Okay, thank you, Melanie. And first of all, I want to say I'm Jan Bray, and I happen to be at the Saratoga Racetrack in Saratoga, New York, as a guest of Snap-on Corporation. And the people here at the racetrack were very nice to give me one of the staff storage rooms so I could, the races are going on out there. So hopefully we don't get any background noise. But I wanted you to know, and you all are saving me money because I'm not out there betting and I always lose. So thank you. This saves me a little bit of money for a while. So as Melanie said, first of all, the NOB has been working with a lot of Department of Labor contracts related to apprenticeship in all industries because the workforce boards are so well situated to work with industry. It's a partnership with education, industry, community-based organizations, and then certainly the workforce boards. And the supply chain, it's in partnership with Manhattan Strategies Group, which has become an approved intermediary, just as Michelle was talking about with Equus being an intermediary. Manhattan Strategies Group is as well, and NOB is supporting that initiative and is a partner in that, but focused on the supply chain sector. That flow of materials and goods to consumers, the logistics in terms of warehousing, distribution centers, manufacturing facilities, and then, of course, the handling of materials. So, we're doing outreach to retail industry, hospitality industry, manufacturing industry, transportation industry, who all have supply chain issues across the country. So if we can advance the slides once more, and so that you can see what I'm talking about. So part of this, what we have set up is this supply chain automation workforce hub, SCA workforce hub for short. And it's that one-stop, just as Michelle talked about with what they're doing, it's a one-stop solution. In terms of we are there to help with, recruitment of individuals, recruitment of employers, help to develop the apprenticeship programs, get that application through the Department of Labor, because we do have some back channels. We understand the difference between a state apprenticeship office and a federal apprenticeship office, who reviews and how it is reviewed. So our job is to help that employer, or in some cases it's a community college or a four-year college that's going to sponsor, but help the one who wants to sponsor it develop their training program, get it through the process, the application and approval process, and then help them with the talent pipeline. Diversity and equity and inclusivity is a major focus that we have as part of this, of course, which I know you are all doing that. And and also as an intermediary, we provide a lot of support services. And this is important, and that's why we're so thrilled that Workforce Connections has brought you all together in doing this, because the workforce boards and the WIOA funding is a part of this. We can help employers or the sponsor of a RAP figure out how to braid funding. How do you pull funding together to support your initiatives? And we also know what other programs are out there in the supply chain area, what competencies have been developed where so you're not starting from scratch. The other thing that's really important with this, because it's an approved intermediary, there's an incentive fund. The incentive fund is $1,000 per apprentice, a minimum of 2 apprentices, up to $40,000, to be applied by the sponsor. The sponsor has to apply for it. Now, even though it's based on apprentice, it can be used for tuition assistance. It can be used for mentorship training, development of training, or training the mentors. It can be used for the purchase of equipment. It can be used for anything that helps that apprentice, that helps recruit and the apprentice complete. Anything except wages. It cannot be used to offset wages. And, so we have I think if we can advance the slide one more time, I can't remember what's on the next slide. Okay, that's our directions. But so we have an application. If you go up to the Workforce Hub, and you can get it through the NOB website. We have a direct link to it, and you can see there's a frequently asked questions. There's a simple application form. Now, funding is only given once you have, it cannot be existing apprentices. It can be an existing apprenticeship program, but they have to be a new cohort of apprentices whose names have just been entered into Rapids. So if you're planning to bring on a cohort, you already have a program and you're planning to bring on a cohort of 10 apprentices, you can apply for $10,000. And that can go towards whatever helps you. The goal is to enroll as many apprentices and help them be successful. But at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that you are meeting your workforce needs. And so that's what the supply chain, this is a huge area. We are working with several national organizations, the National Coalition of Certification Centers, which connects with industry, major industry partners across the country, but also community and technical colleges and career tech centers, many of whom are in the process of developing a supply chain rep at the Career Tech Center, and are going to bring in employers, but the center is going to be the sponsor. It can work in different ways. We're working with the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council, who has certifications in this area, curriculum in this area, and we're helping them develop competencies. Although they will not sponsor a RAP, they will work with industry to do that. And the first one that's coming on board is Target. They plan to sponsor a registered apprenticeship program. We have Festo, we have Mitsubishi, so it's a very broad-reaching, because supply chain touches every industry and just about every employer out there. So go ahead, Mel.
I would say Jan just gave a really great overview of the incentive fund, but Sonia was kind enough, since we're not there, to print out a fact sheet that gives a little bit more details to help answer some of the questions that are available to employers, resources, including the incentive fund, plus a couple of the websites that Jan just mentioned. Our last slide has our contact information on there. We are here to help employers who are interested in RAPs. That's what we do. We're here to help any employer that the Workforce Connections team is working with. So any types of RAP questions, but also specific to this initiative, we are here to answer. So we're happy to answer any questions now that you all might have.
Thank you, Mel and Janet. We appreciate you setting the time aside to come talk to us. As you know, we have launched so far 3 of the industry sector partnerships for 7 of our target industries here in Southern Nevada. And when I say target industries, it doesn't include the big one, hospitality, gaming, entertainment, because that's our core industry. But the 7 are really focused on diversifying the economy. So 3 have been launched already, and employers are here in the room, from healthcare services. The second one is general and advanced manufacturing, and the third one is information and communications technologies. Next month in September, we launch 2 more, one in clean technologies and the other one logistics, or transportation and logistics. And finally, in October, we launched the last 2, which are creative industries and business and financial services. So with that said, though, I have a question. Could you give us an example of maybe one company? I know you've talked about national associations and multiple regions you're helping. Does it come to mind an example of a company, an organization, an employer that's perhaps had already some success with you and or the national partners that you're working with?
Well, so there's one company that actually they've had a program and we help them regenerate it, is Festo. They have large manufacturing organizations. They are about logistics. The company is headquartered in New Jersey. Their main plant is in Mason, Ohio. which was fun to go visit. But we actually sat and updated their program. They have apprentices in there, and they are going to be across the country. And in fact, they have a partner. Festo is a Swiss company, but they have a partner in Germany who is going to be sponsoring, taking the Festo program, using it as is, but they're going to sponsor it in California. So we're helping them get through that. Also Mitsubishi, which has been doing training, but hadn't yet put it into a registered apprenticeship program. They are in Ohio. And so we are doing that as well for them. So that's a main one. Go ahead.
Those are two really great examples, but I want to highlight that the reason we created the hub is those are great companies, and we're excited to see the work that they're doing. But the hub is to help small and medium-sized businesses that have always been interested in registered apprenticeship program and haven't had the bandwidth, the staff, the expertise to set up a program, think through all the requirements, maybe needed a little financial help. And that's what the hub is there, is to really help these small and medium-sized companies, think through what was possible as far as a wrap goes.
I think what's also interesting, let me just add, and Melanie and I had connected with them, the Missouri correctional system is very interested in this, and they actually work closely with the Workforce Board. We learned they have one-stop centers in the correctional facilities, and so we are working with them to develop the registered apprenticeship program so those people come out and they can be put to work, and that's a very important population that's there. You have, as we mentioned, Target. Target's been doing training. This is a huge, as you can imagine, a huge need for them. They've developed training, but how do they take advantage of the tax credits? How do they really add that extra value to an individual to convince them to come and go through that training? And so that's why they came, and they're very excited. And because they are using competencies and curriculum that are being established on a national level by MSSC, this will go very quickly. We've already started working with them. We're working with Georgia Piedmont College, which has a lot of apprentices. They're going to start one in the supply chain area. Supply chain apprenticeships are very new. There aren't really many. We looked and we've been talking to the Department of Labor. They have very few approved ones. So this is a brand new area. And so it's across the board, but because of all the work that's been done so far in the competency area, it should move quickly for companies that want to get involved with it.
One of the ways that Mel and Janet, that we, I think, appreciate that Nob wanted to jump in and talk to our employers here is that supply chain as a concept really applies across multiple industries, right? Because everybody has, if you will, the supply chain affects everybody, whether it's Target or the small employers. And so I would encourage the employers here to think about that there is relevance there. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to is here in our country, the apprenticeship is usually tied to the trades, because that's the one industry has really done well with registered apprenticeships over the years, over the decades. But in some countries like the ones you mentioned, Germany and Switzerland, you go there and you meet an employer who has, let's say, a watch shop. And he has 2 or 3 employees, most likely 1 or 2 are apprentice, because that's how you become a watchmaker over there as an apprentice, or small winemakers or small cheese makers. And so all these occupations have registered apprenticeship programs tied to them, and that's how people become professionals in those countries. And so I think to hear you say that here, there's more companies embracing that idea. One day, I think hopefully we'll see again more registered apprenticeships in manufacturing, healthcare, retail, IT, all these different industries. So, and one thing I'll point out also, you saw the $1,000 from this particular opportunity or funding stream, if you will. But add to that, those that we've been mentioning to you available already in the one-stop through our WIOA dollars that are already targeted for apprenticeships. And add to that, those funding streams that we've announced to you, we've got from City of Las Vegas, from the American Recovery Plan, and also from the community funding project from the congressional delegation, and most recently the incumbent worker training funding that was awarded by DETR to the local board. So that's when we talk about braided funding or leveraging multiple streams to support a work-based learning opportunity that you would have in your companies, whether it be registered apprenticeship or something else. But that's kind of to give you the picture about what we talk about when we talk about braiding funding. So any questions for Janet and Melanie before we move on to our third presenter? Employers, members, oh, there you go, Yvette. Please tell us who you are.
My name is Yvette Bayless. I'm the Title I Director for WIOA Services. I have a question about whether there's a difference between an intermediary and a sponsor.
Well, they can be, believe it or not, they can be one and the same, but in this case, they're not. An intermediary's role, and I think Michelle actually sort of laid that out, is there to help. We provide technical assistance, whether it's identifying competencies, getting it through the approval process, helping to outreach to potential apprentices. It's really the supportive and the technical assistance side. A sponsor can be, as we said, an employer, a community college, a workforce board, it can be anyone, but they are actually the ones that are applying for approval of the apprenticeship program and are responsible for its implementation and the data collection and reporting. Because every apprentice has to be entered into the RAPID system at the Department of Labor if it's a national program. Most states use RAPIDs. There are a few states that use something else. But so they have to report that, and they're held accountable for it. That's the sponsor of it. They are the ones that have really determined these are the competencies. We know that they're industry validated, and we are keeping track of all the apprentices in there. That's different. But there are times where the intermediary and the sponsor are one and the same, and that's okay.
That's interesting. Thank you for that question. That was a good question. Anybody else? Go ahead, Vicente. Yep.
Hi, John Fumaro from Ocean Spray Cranberries. What's the success criteria for receiving the financial incentive? So if you bring somebody on and they work for 3 months and then leave, are they eligible? Is the organization eligible for that incentive, or do they have to be completed in there for a couple of years?
No, you can put in for funding as soon as you enroll an apprentice. You can, and actually, I don't want to confuse things. If you know you're going to bring in a cohort of 10 apprentices, and again, I'm just throwing out a number, and they're going to start October 1st, but you need to start putting things in place to get them going. You can apply now for $10,000. You will not get the money until you actually enroll that apprentice, and they just need to be enrolled. All right. Nobody's asking, how long it takes or whatever. It's the enrollment. It's to help you with getting the apprentice there and to be successful. But as soon as you enroll an apprentice, that money is and the money is released to the sponsor of the program. So I remember hearing Amazon's in there. So if Amazon applies for $10,000 for mentorship training, I'm throwing something out, and because they're bringing on 10 apprentices, they fill out the application and they enroll those 10 apprentices. That $10,000 is going to Amazon to utilize with those apprentices in the way they apply for it. Could be purchasing equipment that's used in the training. So it could be used to offset the RTI, the related instruction. So that's all that's really required of that.
And John, if I was reading to your answer, I think, and this helps me too, hearing from Janet, but I think, John, you were poking at the fact that today, one of the problems that all employers are experiencing is not just attraction of talent, but retention of talent. And so I think you were saying, we have the best intentions as employers to create a sustainable talent pipeline within our organization, and in this case, through a registered apprenticeship. And in good faith, we want to take advantage of the incentives and things, but also it's out of your control that a number of those registered apprenticeships leave. And so I think that's a really good topic, because in our government programs, of course, we're trying to administer your tax dollars and our tax dollars, and we want those investments to be, again, solid and successful. But I think I'll venture a little bit to tell you that obviously that if that was to happen, the government's not going to come back and say, we need to collect that 1,000 back, because it was all done in good faith. And so that step is, if you will, never reversed. If anything, we would kind of shift into a mode of how can we improve the retention strategy, right? Because we know that you as an employer are trying to create a sustainable process. But and believe me, registered apprenticeship is not the only one that your question applies to. We do on-the-job training as well, where we will cover a portion of your new employee's wages for a few weeks or months. And same thing, right? Sometimes the employers say, we had the best of intentions with this employee, but after 3 months, their mother got ill across the country and they had to leave. That's nobody's fault. It's something that does happen. And again, the employer would not be held liable in that scenario. So hopefully that answers your question from multiple perspectives. Yeah?
There is no completion, specific to this incentive fund, there's no completion requirement.
Thank you, Mel. That's a good question. Vicente, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, Melanie, Janet. I think I asked this at the conference that you both participated in. But for the group, just wanted to get maybe an average of from development to concept of the apprenticeship program to approval, to having that first apprentice. What is the typical time frame that you would say happens? And this could go to all the presenters.
Boy, there's a loaded question if I've ever heard one. Well, so let me put it this way. DOL would say typically, and again, we're talking federal, states are different if you're going just through the state, but the DOL, they say on average 90 days. I will tell you very honestly, it can take anywhere from 90 days to 9 months. It goes across. What we are hoping and what the intermediaries help with are in two ways to shorten that. One, because we know what competencies have already been reviewed and approved, overall general competencies in this area. So we're not starting from scratch. You're going to put in what you need for your company or your specific industry in there. But the baseline of it is already done. We also have the relationships with the reviewers and the 6 regional offices who ultimately make the decision. And we have enough, we have gone through with them all the arguments, all the things. So now we know what drives them, what they need, and so we can get it done as quickly as possible. Our goal is the 90 days.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No questions, but can I chime in there too? I think Michelle touched on this
Tell us who you
earlier.
are.
Oh, sorry, this is Jake. I'm here with HCAP. I'll be talking here in a minute, but just wanted to clarify too. Michelle talked about it, and she talked about how Equus has gone and already registered as an apprenticeship sponsor for all those occupations that she listed. So I would say if you are interested in getting started sooner, like she explained, one of the things that you can do is you can actually just sign on as an employer partner with an existing nationally registered apprenticeship, and then you're either able to stay with that program for as long as you want, or like Michelle said, a lot of organizations decide, oh, this is great, we want to be our own program sponsor. You can actually still do that. So you're not precluded from registering your own program if you wanted to join on and start right away. And we do see a lot of employers that elect to go that route, and it does shorten pretty significantly the time frame that they can actually start the apprenticeship. It doesn't shorten the time frame to get their own program registered. It's still going to take that 3 to 9 months, but they're able to access all of the benefits of the apprenticeship program while they're kind of going through that process.
Oh yeah, absolutely, John. Here you go.
One more question, John from Ocean Spray again. Are the financial incentives, is that by site or by organization? So if there's 10 factories, is it 40,000 per factory, or is it 40,000 per organization?
It's per sponsor. So if you are the sponsor, I don't care. We don't care how many sites you have, okay? So if you are the sponsor of the RAP and you have 40 apprentices across 5 different sites. You can put in for $40,000. As I said, it's $1,000 per apprentice up to $40,000. It's per sponsor, not per site.
And so again, to do the math there, John, if you had 40 employees where you were the sponsor, that's 40,000. If the community college was a sponsor of the next 40, there's another 40,000. And so it just depends on who the sponsor is. And the money, again, is released to the sponsor, right? Janet?
Yes, yes, it is to the sponsor.
Yep.
And by the way, it's the Department of Labor that put the cap of 40,000 on
Yep.
there. It's not, we in Manhattan Strategies did not, that came from them. But yes, it's 40,000 per sponsor, and the money goes to the sponsor.
And in this case, John, this is just to highlight again, this is a $1,000 per apprentice financial incentive that is coming directly from their bucket, but it's only one of multiple financial incentives that are available through the system if you decide to go down this route. Theirs is pretty flexible in the sense that it can be, I heard it can be used for multiple things, just not wages, right? But they said buying equipment,
Correct.
writing curriculum, mentorship, so that's the good piece about that one. But there's other ones that can be used for wages. And so it's all about just braiding or leveraging the multiple resources for somebody who is interested in establishing a registered apprenticeship program. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have multiple sites.
Okay. Very good. So any other questions before we move? I don't see anyone. I come here to thank Mel and Janet. Thank you for being here. I don't know how long you will stay with us. You're welcome, obviously, too, in case there's questions arise, but I wanted to thank you for being here with us today. So with that, I'm going to bring Jake to the front and tell us who he is and share his perspective.
Thank you, Jaime, and good to see everyone. Appreciate your time. As I said earlier, my name is Jake Mcclelland. I am here representing the Healthcare Advancement Program, which is also one of the DOL contracted apprenticeship intermediaries. We do focus specifically on healthcare and behavioral health, but we also have branched out into some of the teaching and things like that that Michelle talked about. But like Michelle
Jake,
said,
just to say, it doesn't mean that you can't, even though you've been focusing on this, you're open to doing other
Yes,
ones. Okay.
yes. I was going to say, like Michelle and like the folks from NOB said, if you are not in healthcare and you want some assistance, we all work together. We all will get you to the right place, with the right either intermediary, or we can help provide assistance to you as well, and it's all no cost to the employer. But I did want to talk about a very specific example of an apprenticeship program. Jaime asked the question earlier to NOB about, do you have an example of an employer that's actually started a registered apprenticeship and is taking advantage of all of the benefits that come with it? If you happen to listen to the Workforce Connections podcast, like I know you all do, a couple months ago, Jaime had on a gentleman from Central Texas, the Austin region. His name is Mark Sherry. He's the vice president of HR for a large healthcare system there called the Baylor Scott and White Health. And so they actually started an apprenticeship program a couple of years ago that they've been running and have had people go through. And then just recently, I started working with their organization as well, and I've helped them expand as well as add new employers. So real quick, just a quick overview. As I mentioned, Baylor Scott and White Health, they are one of the largest healthcare systems in the state of Texas. A few years ago in the Austin region specifically, they had a very critical shortage of certified medical assistants. And so they, heard about the apprenticeship model. They went through the process of becoming their own sponsor. They worked with a community college, and earlier this year they actually decided that they wanted to expand that model. And so they approached their community college, and for whatever reason, the college just didn't have the capacity, whether they lacked instructors or classroom space or whatever. So they started exploring this different kind of model that they've now put in place. And so not only are they doing this in the Austin region, earlier this year they started branching out to some of their other locations outside Austin, especially they serve a rural area that's right outside the capital. That's about an hour away, that they've had the same thing, trouble finding medical assistants to take those positions. So they've now utilized this apprenticeship program to grow that occupation there. And then just recently, even within the last couple of months, there's 2 new employers, separate employers in the Austin region that joined on. One is Austin Regional Clinic, which is I would say a medium-sized clinic, and I think the NOB folks were talking earlier about one of the great things about the apprenticeship model is that, especially if you go through an intermediary or some kind of sponsor, it's a great way for smaller, mid-sized companies to really take advantage of apprenticeship without having to take on all of the burden and the cost of running a program themselves. And then the second new employer is a group called Ascension Seton. They're part of a huge nationwide healthcare system, but in the Austin region, they just started with their first 6 apprentices a couple weeks ago. Since January, there's actually been 41 new MA apprentices just in the Austin region. 25 of those are still active. 14 have actually completed and are now certified medical assistants. And then we had 2 that actually just kind of voluntarily withdrew. So I threw those out there just to kind of see, again, it's not a perfect model for everybody. Some people, even with all the supports that come with an apprenticeship program, just aren't able to make it through. But it's actually a pretty high success rate. And then there's actually 11 more between the 3 partners that are scheduled to start next month. This program, this model that we're going to talk about is actually also now being used in other states. So it's very much a very easily replicable model. And by the way, also, I'm focusing specifically on this one occupation, but the lessons learned and the structures and some of the specifics actually could apply to any industry, any occupation within that industry. So just keep that in mind. So the apprentice pool composition, a lot of times we hear, where do my apprentices come from? Do I have to hire somebody that you're going to send to me, or do I have, do I get to pick my own? And the answer is you absolutely get to pick your own apprentices. So for this particular program, there's 3 general pools that they have found apprentices from. First, they had some current medical assistants that they had on staff, people that they hired typically within a 3 to 6 month period that just got started in that occupation, who were not currently certified, but they wanted to get certified. So they actually ended up enrolling them in the program. The great part about that is because they had a little bit of experience, they were actually able to get credit for that. So they didn't have to go through like the full apprenticeship program. They were actually sort of moved ahead and had like an advanced standing. The other nice thing about that is because they were already on staff, there's no additional wage costs. So you heard about all the great resources, and then, like Janet and Melanie said, the only thing that typically isn't covered with a lot of these apprenticeship grants is going to be the wages of the apprentices. So the nice thing, if you do start with people that are kind of in the role already, is that you already have them on your payroll and you don't have to necessarily have additional wages that you have to account for. We see this, especially people then in the current role, new employers that are sort of just starting apprenticeship. This is very typically or commonly where they typically try to pull their first group from, because again, they're people that they're familiar with. They know that they've at least kind of showed up on time, and they've expressed an interest in sort of advancing their career. So they're really great candidates for employers that are really just kind of getting started and want to test it out. The second pool, very similar, candidates for upskilling who are already with the organization. So a lot of employers do use the apprenticeship model as a way of creating internal pathways for their workers or upskilling their workers. So in this case with the medical assistant program, it could be folks who are, in the environmental services like housekeeping and janitorial and things like that, who have no clinical, experience whatsoever. It could be individuals who are scheduling or doing administrative work at the clinic, or answering phones or checking people in that want to, again, advance their career. So it's a great way to do that, and it's a nice way to create that upward mobility, which in turn creates that goodwill with the employee and that retention rate that Michelle and the NOB folks were talking about. It's also another great way to sort of test people out. Again, making sure that they're going to be great team players, they're going to show up on time, they're going to have the right kind of attitude and the soft skills, if you will, that you're looking for. And so what we've actually seen with some employers is that they have created this sort of sometimes official, sometimes unofficial, upskill and backfill model, where they will actually hire people into a entry level type role with the idea that in 3 months they plan on moving them up, and then and it's easier for them to then go and backfill that entry level position than it is to find a certified worker already in the position. So it kind of creates this natural pool of folks that they can kind of cycle through. And then last but not least, we've actually seen this more probably in the last year or so as things start to return to relative normalcy. But they are using this apprenticeship program as a way to hire more people into the role, so the external hires. And so really, especially like in healthcare, but I know other occupations as well, sometimes you want somebody that has a little bit of experience or a certification, but there just aren't them around. It's just a simple lack of people. Some of the post-secondary programs, especially again in rural areas, but they just aren't big enough to meet the demand. So they might graduate 100 medical assistants or 200 nurses a year, but there's a need for 500 of those occupations, and it's just there's just not enough. And so apprenticeship is a great way to sort of expand your recruitment pool by posting opportunities that don't require previous experience, don't require somebody to have already gone through an education program and things like that. So the program components for this specific model that we're talking about, of course, there's on-the-job training. This is the hands-on part. This is really the star of the show, if you will, when it comes to the apprenticeship. This is where the folks are learning the bulk of their stuff. You're training them to your exact specifications. So what happens is the individual gets hired on as an apprentice. They come into the employer site, and some of them work full-time right from the start. Sometimes some of them work part-time. Especially when we see some of that upskilling. Sometimes the problem is they still need that person to do their old job, and so it's hard they're kind of creating one hole by filling another. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we want to keep you in your current role for 30 hours a week, and then for 10 hours a week, you're actually going to go to the clinic and you're going to start shadowing the certified MAs, and you're going to start doing that part of it. So it takes a little bit longer for them to go through the process, but it's a way for the employer to not kind of, create one hole, like I said, by filling another. So what usually happens in an apprenticeship is, the folks, the employer will identify, these are the 25 or these are the 50 skills or competencies that I really need somebody to have mastered to be a valuable worker in that role. And so they put together this checklist, and then as the person gets hired on, the employer determines, through their own methodology, however they want to do it or however they're currently doing it. Because as Michelle mentioned, a lot of folks are already doing these kind of things anyway. They will then, kind of check it off. So they might have the person observe one time or 2 times or 3 times. Then they'll have them do it a couple times with somebody kind of over their shoulder. And then, they'll eventually end up doing it independently, and the employer says, okay, you know how to do this, and they check it off. And then once they get through with all of the competencies that are checked off, then that's when that part of the apprenticeship program is completed. The related technical instruction, or the education piece, or the classroom piece, whatever you want to call it, the RTI, for this particular program, it's 156 total hours. It's completed over different time frames depending on the period. If you haven't heard it multiple times today, the one thing that we really want you to take away from the apprenticeship model is that it's very flexible. It is employer driven. Employers can kind of customize and design it the way that they want. So you see there, for this particular model, we have some employers that are having their folks speed through and get done in 9 weeks when they really focus on sort of the classroom part of it, and they're only working maybe part-time hours at the clinic. And then we have some that are allowing their people to take up to 15 months because they don't necessarily need them to be done right away. The other nice thing about an apprenticeship program that I think sometimes does get lost in the shuffle is that apprentice, yes, there's going to be that period, especially if they're coming in without the skills already, where they need a little bit extra hand-holding, and it may be, tough. A lot of employers sometimes just don't have the people to train them necessarily. They're, dealing with a shortage in the entire organization, so it's hard to take somebody off the floor or off their regular job and kind of babysit somebody. But After the first 3 weeks or a month, these are very much, additional help. So what we usually see when we have a new employer come on board is like the HR team or those guys are really excited to get going. And then the clinical folks are like, oh gosh, I can't, there's no way I can have this person here. They're just going to distract me. I got 19 patients to see today, blah, blah, blah. And then after, like I said, about a month or so, that person may be rooming patients on their own. They may be doing, charting things on their own. And so it actually becomes like they're filling a role. So it's kind of a win-win situation. And they're like, oh, can we get another apprentice in here? Because, I need somebody else to kind of take off some of this stuff off my plate. Most of the coursework is done during non-paid hours. There are apprenticeships, there are employers, I should say, that do pay also, sometimes up to 8 hours a week, depending on, again, the employer's preferences for the people to actually take the education part. That is not required at all. That's still not typical or more common. I see more common that the apprentice is responsible for doing that on their own. But it is a way for an employer to kind of extend those benefits out to a worker and kind of stand out, especially if you have multiple employers in a region that are now offering a program. They're sort of going to be competing now for apprentices the way that they would compete for any talent. So they have started offering it as sort of a perk, like, hey, we're going to actually pay you while you're taking your classes as well. And then the great thing about doing the model online, it allows for open start dates, so you're not necessarily beholden to like the community college when they have classes available, or they start in September and then they don't have another start until January or whatever the case may be. It also allows for there to be no minimum or maximum cohorts, so you don't have to have necessarily 10 people starting at once. You could have one person or two people. Like I mentioned before, there's that flexible scheduling where you can have them go through in 6 months, in 9 months, whatever the case may be. And then that asynchronous learning option is really great for the apprentices themselves who, are also adults with family responsibilities and things like that. So sometimes their kid gets sick. They might not be able to go to the class at the community college when it's scheduled. So this allows them to basically do it and fit it within their schedule whenever they can. So the national certification that's involved with this program, there's two options right now. Two different certifying bodies now recognize apprenticeship, registered apprenticeship as a pathway to certification. The first is the CCMA that's offered through a group called National Health Career Association. And the second is the RMA, which is just now getting started in September. So they saw what NHA was doing, and they never had this as an option before, and they decided, hey, we better get with the program because apprenticeship is a growing model, and if we don't start offering this, then we're going to start losing our customers to NHA. And I say all that, probably I don't think there's any employers that necessarily hire MAs here, but I say that just because, like, again, this is a very much an expanding model. It's becoming less and less rare that you'll see it in occupations like healthcare and manufacturing. And so it really is kind of trending towards being more and more of just a generally accepted practice. So a quick recap of the process. Step one is the employer will hire the individual into the role. Some employers create a separate job classification in their system for a medical assistant apprentice. Some don't even bother. They just hire a person into the MA role right from the start, and then they are technically an apprentice, but it's not in their job title or anything like that. Steps 2 and 3 are, again, going to be sort of interchangeable. They'll begin that related instruction or the classroom part. They'll go to work at the site. They'll start learning that hands-on stuff. They'll start getting their competency checklist checked off. And then once they complete those 2 steps, they are then become eligible to sit for the national certification exam. So either one, depending on which one is preferred by the employer, it's a very similar process. And then step 5 is they become a certified MA and then either transition into a full-time certified role if they were started off as an apprentice, or they just kind of pick their final spot, because a lot of the employers have multiple sites that they are able to offer their people. So they might have done their apprenticeship at this clinic because that's where there was an opening, but they really want to, work at the clinic that's a mile down the street from their house, so they end up transitioning. So the apprentice responsibilities, they have to, of course, meet and maintain eligibility for employment. So whatever the requirements are for the employer, that's who gets the final say. You never have to hire somebody that you don't want to. You interview them, you go through their normal process, and you decide this is somebody that I want to bring on or I don't want to bring on. They do have to complete that coursework according to the schedule. Again, typically during non-paid hours, although that's becoming a little bit more where sometimes we are seeing that it's paid. They do have to pass the national certification exam because ultimately that's what the benefit is for the employer, is that we are now able to have more certified workers in this role or more skilled workers in this role. So if they can't pass the exam, then they have to sort of reevaluate. But for all the people that I'm aware of for the Baylor Scott and White program, I think they've had like basically 100% pass rate for the exam. Maybe not on the first try, but they give up to 2 tries. But so by the second try, they're all passing. And then last but not least, they do have to provide the information to the, whether it's the state or federal apprenticeship office. Some additional employer requirements that we have, just again to kind of show you, the way that it can be structured. So these may or may not apply to your organization, but this is just for this specific program. They do still require that people are 18 or older. We've talked a lot about figuring out ways to pull directly from high school. We haven't quite figured it out yet because of the HR requirements. So usually, again, someone in the organization is excited and says, oh, look at all these high school kids that are taking all these classes and they're not going to go to college, so why don't we hire them? And then HR says, oh, our policy is still 18 and older. So we haven't quite figured that out. Same thing with the high school diploma or GED, but I know that's becoming, again, the next evolution in apprenticeship is to really try to reach down and offer it to youth so that as soon as they graduate high school, they can just seamlessly transition. They have to pass a drug test and background screen just like anybody else. Just like all of their employees, they have to be vaccinated for COVID-19, so that may or may not be a requirement. And then last but not least, I put no healthcare experience required because, again, when people are applying for the program, sometimes they're like, well, I can't do this. I've never worked in healthcare before. And that's absolutely not a barrier at all when it comes to apprenticeship. That's, again, one of the great things about it is that it takes people that maybe can't afford to go to a normal, education program or traditional education route. People that are, are maybe transitioning from another industry that, are tired but want to, try something new. It's a great way to really expand the number of people that you're able to kind of market to. So that is actually it for the presentation. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer it. And I think that's the end of the presentations as well. So if you have questions for Michelle or the NOB folks, feel free to chime in with those as well.
Yeah, this would be the time for questions for anybody. And I'm going to warn those of you who were at the lunches, I know you are not, but definitely want to hear from you about what your experience today was. Did you learn anything today that maybe you didn't know at the lunch? And maybe what you take away from this hearing about apprenticeship is something that maybe woke up your interest or that you want us to follow up on with you. So I'm going to pick on my board member, I guess, and maybe start with Leo and say, Leo, for today, what do you take away? Is this, has the presentation of the information changed the way you think about registered apprenticeships?
Sure, because it's something that we really haven't worked with in the past. And I was at the healthcare launch. I wasn't at the IT launch, but a little backwards, but that's okay. So on the healthcare side, all of our clients are having problems hiring people. So, even if they can maybe get together and do kind of a joint apprenticeship program to get those people in the door, that would make sense. For my organization, I'm interested from an IT standpoint because we've done that in the past where we hire somebody, almost minimum wage, and then they're making $60K a year later because it's such a rapid, learning process. If we can have it formalized, that would make it a lot easier to do that. So if there's any interest in the regular, both cybersecurity and IT infrastructure type, help desk, those types of roles.
Yeah, and that's part of our desire, I think, as a industry sector partnership for each industry, perhaps find occupations like those that we saw listed today that multiple employers would have interest in, and then partner with the community college to do something for many employers instead of just one. So let me go back to Amazon, I guess. Craig, share with us, maybe you have a lot of experience, that's why I'm picking on you on apprenticeships, but maybe what has today, if at all, changed the way you think about how we can use them here?
I think the biggest thing to take note of is the use of intermediaries in the space. I think a lot of the work of building an apprenticeship and getting it registered and all that is burdensome, right, to the companies that are doing this hiring. So I think having the intermediaries that can act as sponsors and you can just jump right in and just sign that employer acceptance agreement and move on, right? I think that's a game changer right there, because you don't have to go through that whole process. So if we can find occupations that are already registered under the intermediary, they're acting as a sponsor, I think it's a no-brainer to move forward with.
I agree. Thank you for saying that, because that was what I took away and why I wanted the employers to hear about this available help from Equus and NOV and Jake's organization, that there are intermediaries that are willing to do and ready to do that heavy lift, which is most often the hardest piece about implementing an apprenticeship. So wanted you guys to know that's available, so it's a little bit easier to us to make a reality here in our region with you. So John, what about on behalf of Ocean Spray, what are you taking away?
Well, definitely the intermediaries picking up the hard work, that's huge. And then the other part is that with the apprenticeship, it's already stuff that we do, the on-the-job training, the assessments and the evaluations, and it's how do you package it and roll it up into an apprenticeship. And it sounds like it can be applied to any position in the organization, especially that whole, how did you say it, Jake, there, backfill? Upskill and backfill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that again. I know from my friends at Sunshine Minting, I've heard it from you as well as other manufacturers that's the need, right? Not only to identify, but retain and upskill your existing employees. So share with us perhaps what today has meant for you at SMI. Is this something that maybe has got your interest to continue to look into it?
Oh, absolutely. And the utilization of the intermediaries is, going to, like you said, be a game changer and make it a lot easier for everyone to participate. I do have a question regarding the restrictions that employers might have regarding the number of hours, the kind of shifts that an apprentice could work, and things like that. So if somebody could answer that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, as far as I know, I mean, it's the same as any other employee. There's no limitations. I mean, if you have a policy that applies, like you have to pay them at least minimum wage, of course. But, there's no limited number of hours and no maximum, that as long as you're complying with just labor laws in general.
Okay, and their mentor or trainer would have to be with them on that shift, on that same schedule?
Not necessarily. It's not. You can set it up that way, but you can also set it up where it's not necessarily a one-on-one thing. Like Joe is assigned to Bob, and Bob is his mentor. It's really like anybody that's on that shift. Especially we see like apprentices, when they get towards the end of their apprenticeship period, they are more and more just like a regular worker. And so they still have to have that mentor, or they call it a journey worker in apprenticeship, that they are able to kind of access and have on site if needed. But they don't, by the time they get to, month 3, month 4, they don't have to have that person over their shoulder anymore. It's very similar to, any construction site that utilizes apprentices. Is, you have your folks that are just starting that need a little bit more hand-holding. And then at the end, you have people that are just kind of doing the job and they're just making less money.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, the mentor doesn't equate to job shadowing. It can be, depending on the occupation, it can be as low touch or as high touch as needed for that specific occupation. So it can be a weekly check-in, a monthly check-in, or it can be a level of shadowing or working with that individual if the occupation requires that. So it's essentially, Jake's already said this, whatever you would do for your current employees, it's adding the apprenticeship program packages that, allows you to market it, and allows you to tap into resources. So,
Does that help? Yeah? Okay. So Nick, I'm going to pick on you now. How about you on behalf of your company? Remind us, can I have a mic, Vicente, where are you? Yeah.
Can you guys just mention ratios, though? When you talk about that, there's ratios that you have to consider as well.
So ratios, who can address that? Michelle?
So yeah, I'll try. Hopefully I won't butcher it. There is typically in an apprenticeship, when you get approved, you put together or you name like a ratio of the number of mentors or journey workers that are going to be available to an apprentice. So typically it's 1-to-1, 2-to-1. I've seen it go up to like 5-to-1, 5 mentors to every apprentice, or 5 apprentices to every mentor. So it's not like if you have, 100 people on staff, you can't hire 100 apprentice or 200 apprentices. Typically, there's got to be a ratio, but that's all part of the thing that the intermediary or the sponsor would help you kind of do. But it's not unlimited the number of people that you could take on as an apprentice.
Greg, was that it?
Yeah, and again, the mentor can be the formal supervisor, like from the HR structure, or it can be someone who's highly skilled in the occupation and provides support, guidance, and training.
Janet, do you want to weigh in on any of this? You're muted. We can't hear you. You're still muted. That's not is it Chris? It's not us? Oh, yeah, we can't hear you, Janet. Something happened there. We heard a beep. Oh, was it Bluetooth? We're still waiting. We can't. Hello, Janet?
All right, is this
Yes.
coming through?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I can't figure out these headphones. Anyway, it's technology is never very good with me. I think that Michelle and Jake answered it correctly. And I think what people sometimes forget with the apprenticeship program, especially these days, is it's actually flexible. It's what meets the needs of the employer. And it's not that there are the old style, which are still good, and I'm not saying that negatively, but it was 4-year program, and it was done in a very certain way. It's a lot more flexible now. You can do it all competency-based, competency plus seat time. Some apprentices, depending on the job, are in related instruction 2 days a week, and on the job 3 days a week. Sometimes it's half a day each day. So. And as Michelle said, the mentor can come from anywhere within the organization. There just needs to be a mentor assigned on record, and that's really important. So it's really fairly flexible these days, and that's the point I want to make.
Yeah, that's kind of the message I've been hearing too, to not to be too scared of the model that in the past has seemed rigorous, 4 years on construction sites. Again, when you go to other countries, you see very models that are embedded in small employers that only have 2-3 employees, and 2 or 3 of them are apprentice. So, Nick with Cubicle, tell us maybe what this meant for you today.
Yeah, no, this was super helpful. We've been pretty interested in apprenticeship for quite a while, but looking online and looking at these programs is kind of information overload. So you guys putting this together with all the different presenters who are all great definitely painted a clearer picture. So it's very helpful. And my biggest takeaway is the intermediaries, which, we kind of knew existed, but I didn't know how it worked. So, just clearing the air with them today was definitely very helpful, and I think a good route for us to go.
Great. And we're going to talk to you because I think in one or more of our centers, we seem to have there seems to be a need emerging for a private cubicle.
We could help with that.
For virtual connection. So we'll be reaching out.
We do a lot of that.
Good. I'm glad that that's the case. That was the intent. So as we continue to convene you as employers through these industry sector partnerships, again, the next step now that you've seen is who wants to engage, and we'll start to dive down deeper with those of you who want to engage. And remember, again, it's apprenticeship is one of the work-based models that we can help deploy through the resources available at the Employee MV Business Hubs, right? The Employee MV Business Hubs, if you haven't connected yet, make sure you do, because we have staff there that is equipped to, again, connect you to more than just resources for apprenticeship. So raise your hand here if you work at an Employee MV Business Hub. Yeah, there's 4 people there you might want to grab a card from if you haven't yet, because they, again, have a toolbox of tools like these, right? But our commitment to you is if you're interested in the registered apprenticeship, we will take the next steps moving forward. So now let me pick on my new friend from Brightstar, because Connor wasn't here at the launch of the Healthcare Industry Sector Partnership, but would love to hear from you what you heard today.
Yeah, in my field, something we've been struggling with a lot is retention. So I definitely think that's something that this program can help with, bringing people in and just getting them involved in an apprenticeship. They'll stick around. So that's something that could help us out a lot.
Good. Then what we're going to do is, for your peers that weren't here, we're going to give them this recording, give them a week or so to maybe, digest it and say, okay, I want to be a part of it. And then we're going to make a call to those of you employers who do want to take the next step, if you will, right, with the intermediaries in the process of saying what other funding streams would be deployed to help you stand up something like this, And of course, it doesn't have to start with 200 apprenticeships. I think actually it's best to start with 1 or 2. Small is better, pilot it. But we'd love to be, again, part of the support mechanism that helps you do that at your places. So any questions? Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us so that we can also, I think, take the temperature if we're effectively, bringing you information. It sounds like today it was good. But any thoughts from anybody on what you've heard? Perhaps your thoughts on what needs to happen? Yes. Let us know who you are.
Thank you. My name is Azucena. I am with Employee B, the Business Hub. Also, I'm here with Namalda. She is my coworker. We are with Employee B. And thank you all for all the information provided today. It was very helpful. We are doing outreach in my case, I do outreach to manufacturing companies here in Las Vegas, and shortage is the favorite word nowadays. So there is a shortage for maintenance mechanic. And I'm always thinking, what can we do? In this case, how do I tell my employers, where do they start with this? Where do they need to go? If we can have something in writing, maybe in the hub, so we can talk and discuss with our employers how to start with the RAP.
Yeah,
I'll be grateful.
Let's go down that hypothetical road, if you will, Jay, Michelle, and Janet. If a manufacturing company like Sunshine Minting or Ocean Spray came and said, we want to start a maintenance mechanic apprenticeship program, kind of walk us down what that looks like, the first few conversations, weeks, months of that.
So what we normally do is we start out with that informational call or that introduction collaborative call and find out what the specific needs are for that employer. And then, as I mentioned during our presentation, if it's not a standard that we as a sponsor already have approved, we're happy to help in that development, but we also are happy to refer to an organization like NOB or to an organization who already has that program approved and is already working in that specific industry in order to not slow down the process or the development for a particular employer. So I think an outreach, if we can share contact information from today, an outreach to any of us, I would say that we would collaborate with each other and our other intermediary partners to make sure that you're connected to the right individual. Now that doesn't mean, I'll speak for us personally, we won't drop you. We'll still provide technical assistance around workforce system resources and other areas. But we're looking to provide the best customer service and help get the program developed in the most efficient and effective manner.
So let me see if I heard it. If you happen to have already an approved model, then it's as fast as let's go. But if it is a new model, one of the intermediaries, the right one, the best fit one, would sit down and actually work with that employer or group of employers who want to develop that new model for maintenance mechanic, which is a shortage here. And when that starts to happen, again, I remember hearing Janet said that, when you read the paper or the information and stuff, it says 90 days, but the reality is it could take longer to extract from the employers what the core needs are and what the expectations are of on the clock, off the clock, instructional things. All the pieces might take more than 90 days. So let's say, it takes, instead of 3 months, 6 months to put it together. Then what happens? What happens after you get the structure together? Walk us through that next step.
So depending on if they're going to be registering through a state agency or if they're going to be going through the federal government, then it's a little bit of a different process. So here in Nevada, we have the Nevada State Apprenticeship Council that would review all of the standards and approve it. So they meet, I think, sometimes quarterly, sometimes more often, depending on need. I'm not exactly sure what their schedule is, to be honest with you. But it's periodic. It's a few times a year. So you'll submit that to them. They'll like kind of take a look and say, yes, this is good. They'll put it on the agenda for their state apprenticeship council meeting, and then they'll say, yes, this program's approved. And then from there, you just start hiring.
Okay, so let me see if I heard you correctly then. There's two options. If you go through the state, it's that way. What if you don't go through the state apprenticeship program, but instead implement a federal apprenticeship program?
So to implement a federal apprenticeship program, if you're a single employer, there's certain criteria you have to meet. So you have to be, typically in three or more states.
Oh, okay.
You have to have sort of show.
What if it was an industry sector partnership of multiple employers?
Then you could do that, but usually with a national program, what you're doing is you're signing on with somebody that like Equus that already is in multiple states.
Gotcha.
And so they have, again, it's the easiest process ever. You sign what's called an employer acceptance agreement. You take a look at the standards and it says like, yes, I agree to, provide this apprenticeship program based on these standards. I, agree to meet all the criteria. It takes 10 minutes to sign that form. Typically what we see, even when somebody signs that agreement, is that you're now working to customize the program to that employer's needs. So there's very many cookie cutter models out there. We talked about like the process for a new occupation. I don't even know if I've come across a new occupation that wasn't existing somewhere, somebody doing it. So usually what you do with the standards is you will very liberally borrow. So you say, hey, this program, there's a maintenance mechanic program in Rhode Island. You know what, that's been approved. We're going to take that standards, we're going to plop it into our standards, and then we're going to go down and say, you know what, our people don't do that, so we're going to take it out. Or, our people do this, but they also do this, so we're going to add something. So you're almost never starting from scratch anymore unless you're really trying to do something, very unique or a new role that didn't exist 5 years ago or something like that. But, yeah.
Okay. Michelle, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say, like a brewer. We recently started with one of those. But if the occupation isn't currently...
A brewer as in a brewery for beer. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, if the occupation isn't already approved with another intermediary, then we would work directly with that employer to help them develop and get that submitted for approval. And during that waiting period, whether you're waiting for the state to approve it or whether you're waiting for the national folks to approve it, we would also, if the employer is interested, work with them to connect them to workforce system resources so that they can still begin that work and still get some benefit on hiring, creating their curriculum, buying the materials, or equipment that's needed. So tapping into some of those resources. Or going ahead and hiring those individuals, tapping into on-the-job funding, on-the-job training dollars or customized training dollars as eligible, to tap into other resources to still go ahead and start filling that pipeline. And then when the standard gets approved, as Jake mentioned earlier, the individuals can receive credit for the time that they've worked on the job, the training they've already completed. So there's ways to start a program while you're waiting on approval is the short answer.
And you've heard it several times about other resources, and I don't want you to remain nebulous to you. The 4 people, raise your hand again, employees of the staff of the hubs right here. 4 people, get their cards because that's where you can access those resources. When we say other resources, they will make them real to you. They'll tell you what they are, how you get them, and all that stuff. So, Janet, did you want to add anything to what we were just talking about? National, state versus how we move forward on apprenticeships?
Just one thing, because I think Michelle and Jake really, addressed it very concisely and clearly. But let me just give you an example. So when in our conversation with Target, the first thing, because we're starting, even though, we just had the call last week, we went up, there are apprenticeable occupations that are listed in Rapids. We pulled those out that had to do with supply chain, and they have competencies with them that are recognized by the DOL. That's what we're starting. Target is then going to look to go, this matches, this doesn't, et cetera. So, and since they already have a lot of this already done as a company, we're going to start building very quickly with them. We worked with the National Propane and Gas Association. We had to take their occupations and split it down into 3 different titles in order to match what the DOL had. But we used their job descriptions and all of their competencies and was able to put it through. So I think what was said, what Michelle and Jake said, are very, very appropriate there. There's a lot of flexibility. It's looking at what's already done. As I was already said, there aren't really new things out there. It's not about DOL's own net. It is about what's in Rapids, and there are those that are already approved as apprenticeship programs. And then you just customize and modify to some extent what you need. And I'll also reiterate what was just said. I think Michelle said it. Get people, you can even get your incumbent workers can become apprenticeship, but put them into like some of the training right away, which you can then give credit for when your program's approved. So you get them, you committed to the organization and started, and you don't have to wait until the apprenticeship program gets the final approval.
Yep. So we've been hearing the process doesn't have to wait for all those steps. We can begin the process from day one as you officialize everything else as we move on. A commitment to the employers would be, from our perspective, as a local board, and convening these partners in the industry sector partnership, because it's not just about it's about you at the end, because you need the talent. But as you know, the talent pipeline has a lot of players, right? The 4-year universities, the community college, all the post-secondary skill acquisition partners. But that early piece of that pipeline, that K through 12, is the really where it's all coming from. That's where the talent is starting to be developed, and we are making an intentional push to really work with the K through 12 system in a much better way, and we're getting great response from them. I think you've heard us say we have programs. We're developing fellows at each high school to, again, embed your needs into programs earlier and earlier. You've heard us talk about the youth activity books. We just finished the one for healthcare. I think we shared with you guys via email. That's going into CCSD. We're almost complete with general and advanced manufacturing. And so those are tools that we're going to use earlier in elementary school to talk about these maintenance mechanic positions early and make them real to them in high school. And then, of course, through the other post-secondary options that you're going to help us develop. But that's the picture of creating a more sustainable talent pipeline for you as employers. I think one thing we have to be transparent about here, and Craig, I'll need your help here. Could you get Craig a mic? Because we have had changes, Craig, on where the apprenticeship approval process lives. In just this short time that you were up there, it's gone from the Labor Commission to Owen to back to the Labor Commission. And so, Irene just walked out. Adrina, one of the things we're going to need, I think, help is, as an industry sector partnership advocating for these employers, is can we have some clear, if you will, rules or processes, right? Because again, it's been for the past few years, everybody's confused. How does it happen? We've heard about monthly, quarterly meetings. Who's on the council? So, Craig, how could we advocate on behalf of these employers for a more streamlined process to approve state apprenticeships? I know that's a big one, huh?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Nevada has been back and forth on apprenticeship, under different administrations, and the placement of the Apprenticeship Council obviously was with the Labor Commissioner, and then it was put into ON, which is GOIN now, and then now back to the Labor Commissioner. Ultimately, the politics around apprenticeship have been pretty dirty. To put it nicely, around apprenticeship.
You can talk that way now that you're in the private sector.
Right. The funny thing is though, it's not specific to Nevada. It is a countrywide thing. Some states it's worse than others. But really what it comes down to is the fight over what the word apprenticeship means and who owns it, right? Is apprenticeship owned by union construction? Is it owned by Department of Labor, and that fight is ongoing, right? But here in Nevada, depending on who becomes the next state apprenticeship director, I think there's a conversation that needs to happen in streamlining what that process looks like. But I don't think it can happen until we have that person in that office, and we need somebody that's willing to listen and really work on what the formalized steps are. You know, we have the boilerplate template that we can use. You fill in the standards and you submit those. We have a minimum wage for apprenticeship that was established here not too long ago. But the biggest piece for us, I think the biggest place that you can make changes is as they update NAC, what that looks like. NAC 610 is outdated, and there's been processes to try to update that lately, but I think there's still work that needs to be done there. So I think as NAC gets updated, I think there's room there to make these changes and do. And
NAC stands for?
Nevada Administrative Code.
Okay.
Yeah, so Nevada revised statutes are what they are. They can change during the legislative session, but NAC, which is how you administer those programs, what those programs look like, what an application looks like, that's all spelled out there. And some of that is way outdated, you know, probably 10, 15 years ago.
But as you said, it doesn't have to be updated by the legislators, it can be updated by the administration.
Correct.
And the position you talked about, State Apprenticeship Director, am I correct to assume that's under the Labor Commissioner, which is under the Department of, the Director of B&I?
Yes.
Is that how it goes?
Yep,
Okay, so
exactly.
Adrina, what you want to put on our to-do list and use Irene is, we need to meet with those folks, right? The Director of B&I, who's a cabinet level person who reports to the governor, the Labor Commissioner is under them, and then the State Apprenticeship Director is under them. We need to go in there on behalf of these employers and kind of say, you know, they need a streamlined process. We need to unbury, if you will, challenges. If that's NAC, then let's say to them, you probably need to update that so it can be a more streamlined process, because we got employers, small businesses that need it. And so that'll be on us. And we'll let you know how that goes, that advocacy, because again, I hate to say to you, you know, there's all these resources, but then if we have barriers that are being, you know, that are there, we need the state to help us. And we'll also enlist the members of the Governor's Workforce Development Board, like Hugh Anderson and those folks, to help us put some pressure on that as well.
Yeah, and I would also mention that when I was at Nevada System of Higher Education, we did have some negotiation with some of the union officials. And in the last legislative session, NRS was designed to kind of separate construction from non-traditional, to make room to have these conversations for your non-traditional, so that we're not encroaching on their territory, so to speak. So I think the space is there to have that conversation. We just need to make it happen.
All right.
Yeah, real quick, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, there have been non-traditional programs approved in Nevada, so
Oh,
it's
yeah,
not like
absolutely.
this is like a stop sign.
It's
but
it's not
it's-
impossible.
yeah,
it's just you have to jump through the hoops.
you have to jump through hoops, and that's why, you know, Michelle, Equus, anybody like using an intermediary
Janet,
again.
Knob, and you
Yeah,
guys.
exactly. You know, having them worry about that, people that have, you know, experience working with the Office of Apprenticeship. I know with HCAP, we have 3 people that just came from the Office of Apprenticeship, so they know the
The
technicalities.
National
they know,
Office of Apprenticeship?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And like I said, Michelle has gone through the process in multiple states to get programs approved federally. So we can help take some of that.
I think that was clear today, that you guys have great experience and success driving the national ones, for all the reasons you said. But I wanted the employers also to hear, because if something doesn't happen quickly, I want them to know it's not you or even us. There is some work to do here at the state level, because it has been, it's moved around, it's been nebulous. We don't even have a state apprenticeship director. I think the Labor Commissioner just changed too, right, Sonia? So there is I wanted them to know that, hey, it's not like it's all lined up and every position we need is in place, the person. So, but again, as they said, you're not doing it alone. You're going to get us to help advocate on behalf, you know, of the employer community, the industry sectors, that we need their help. We need them to be, you know, part of this solution. So, but it has happened. There are non-traditional apprenticeships that have been established here. I don't know the names, but I know there was a workforce development one that went through. Yeah, so anyway, I want to be respectful of your time. I know we asked you until noon, but any final questions from anybody for Janet, Jake, or Michelle, or us about the industry sector partnerships from anybody? No? Okay, then if not, I'd like to again thank Janet and Mel from NOB, Michelle from Equus, and Jake. A round of applause for them, please, for their time preparing. Thank you, guys. And then you have our commitment, again, to follow up on these things. If you are interested, just let us know, and you'll be a part of the employers that we start to just move along with this process. Again, grab these 4 people that work at the Employee MV Business Hubs, get their card or their information, give them your card, so you can also have a quick access to all the other resources we made reference to today. And if you have any questions of us, we'll stick around. But I wanted to give you as much back of your day as possible. Thank you for being here today. All right.
Thank you. Bye.